We're live. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this evening's Cabinet meeting, Monday the 3rd of February, and welcome to those online and those in the gallery. Can I have authorisation to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of January as a correct record of the proceedings? Thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
Councillor McCourt.
Thank you. Additional agenda items?
There are none.
None. Urgent decisions?
There are none.
There are none. Yes, so I'll just add the fact that item 10 has been withdrawn. Whether or not you want to mention the reason behind that, Lorna, please.
The reason behind that is because of the impending local government reorganisation, and we are speaking again with East Sussex County Council. Thank you, Chair.
Jolly good, thank you for clarifying that. Disclosures of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosing all pecuniary interests, other registrable interests, non-registrable interests in the matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Councillor Timpey.
Thank you, Chair. Member of Bexhill Town Council, items 6 and 7.
Catherine Field.
Council Tax Reduction Scheme, member of East Sussex County Council.
Councillor Richard Thomas.
As Chair of Rother District Housing Company, also as the Rother representative on the Bexhill Museum, and also as a committee member of Bexhill in Bloom, all of which come up at one point or another.
Jolly good, thank you for that. No other declarations? No?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yeah, I've got you, Carl, thank you very much, yes.
Thank you. Just to say, as per Catherine, as an East Sussex County Council executive member of East Sussex County Council in terms of council tax reduction, and obviously if any other agenda item whereupon East Sussex County Council is mentioned, just come to me and I'll be glad to declare a non-prejudicial but a personal interest, obviously. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Beverley Cooper. Beverley?
Yeah, a director on the Housing Board Company.
Right, thank you. I think we're ready to go now, are we? So we have agenda item 6, the draft budget and medium-term financial plan. In the absence of the Cabinet lead, I think, Andrew, you're going to present this report.
Redeclare the declaration I made about half a minute ago.
Right, noted.
Ditto.
We've got that. Well done. Okay, yep.
Declare.
Redeclare. Jolly good. Okay, nobody online that...
Councillor Giowan's online.
Oh, are you there, Ash?
It's on the next page, I think.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep.
You're there, Ash, are you somewhere?
Yeah, Andrew's going to present the report though, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Okay, no doubt you'll make some comments. Okay then, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Since the draft budget came to Cabinet in December, we've had the provisional settlement, and indeed today we've actually had the final settlement, which confirmed the details in the provisional settlement. It was a poor settlement for Rother. We had a 2.99% cash reduction, which reflects a real terms decrease in grant of about 5 to 6%. Typical of most districts, money has been moved away from districts, away from the south, particularly to social care authorities, which is seen as the pressing issue in local government, which indeed it is, and money generally moving up towards the north of the country as we expected. And there will be more of this to come next year when the Fair Funding Review is implemented and we get the 3-year settlement, but that is likely to reinforce those movement of funds away from Southern Shire districts, unfortunately. And there'll also be a business rates reset, which is also likely to cost us money as well. Other changes since the draft budget is we now have the fees and charges appendix at Appendix E, and the interim consultation at Appendix F. And in terms of that interim consultation, we had around 1,300 responses, which is a record. Around 850 of them were people around Norvium objecting to the new car park charges proposed on the car park in Norvium, and also there was a majority against a council tax rise, as people don't like tax rises. Since ONS 2 weeks ago, we have completed the final budget, subject to any changes tonight, mainly around calculations on business rates. We had to complete the NNDR one form by last week, so we don't get the detailed information until very late in the day. And the good news from that is we've been able to reduce the use of reserves compared to the report that went to ONS 2 weeks ago. So in that report, it was suggesting we'd need to use reserves of 1.4 million, but now the paper tonight is saying that we only need to use reserves of about 600,000 to balance the budget. That's still not good. I'd rather not be using reserves to balance the budget, but I'm pleased to say there is a reduction in the use of those reserves in the proposed budget. Appendix G in the papers tonight is the minutes of that ONS meeting 2 weeks ago. And just to point out that ONS are recommending the budget with one exception, which is the new car parking charges on various car parks that haven't charged before. And for avoidance of doubt, in Appendix A on page 13, that is savings or income generation items, NHS 5 to 13. Apart from that, the budget is very little change from the draft budget that came here before. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'll invite Ash, Councillor Joe, and if you wanted to make any comments at this stage, Ash, before I invite others.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think Andrew's covered the key points of it. Yes, it is largely unchanged from the previous one. Great news about the reserves position as a result of the amendments that came in very late. With regards to the parking fees and charges, I know that's something that's going to be discussed. I think, you know, it was a very challenging backdrop in terms of having to review the fees and charges, and whilst, you know, ordinarily we'd look for like consistency across the board where charging is in one place that it mirrors somewhere else, I think we've really got to take into consideration the individual circumstances of the areas around the parking, and that's something that I'm sure we'd want to take forward. But other than that, no, happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. Before I invite one or two members to speak, I'd like to thank Overview and Scrutiny for the very thorough work that you undertook on this and really moved it forward to where I think reflects the consultation and also reflects the views of many members. So I think thank you for that, Paul. And I know it was a long meeting that evening. It went by my bedtime, so I didn't see the rather conclusion of it, but thank you very much indeed for that. So if I can just ask members, Christine, Councillor Badas.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd like to move the recommendation with obviously the amendment of taking on board the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny. So I'm not quite sure how that will be worded. Obviously, the fees and charges contained in Appendix E be approved. That will need to be amended to take those additional car parking charges out of the budget. So, I mean, that would be my view. I think we've listened to the consultation. We've listened to the public. Certainly, as the economic development lead on the cabinet, I've been lobbied by businesses in places like Sidley, for example, and you know, you can see that this would be at this stage a backward step. Also, quite interestingly, I've looked at Brighton and Hove budget arrangements. Just recently, they've actually reduced their car parking charges because they found last year when they put them up that they had a big reduction in car park income, and they've done quite a bit of detailed work and actually worked out that the increase in charges was actually putting people off using the car parks. So they've actually now, there's a really interesting report which talks about the economics behind it. So that is quite an interesting sort of, if you like, parallel. There is just one point, I think I would also, well, a couple of points. On the capital programme, of course, it mentions in the capital programme, and I think it is paragraph 42, about Sidley Depot, and given that the report tonight has been withdrawn, that will need, I think, to be amended. So the capital programme bit will need to be amended because that bit is currently, has been delayed. But I would also like to just raise an issue about it under paragraph 19, where it talks about the election of a new government after 14 years had created enormous uncertainty around central government funding of local authorities. I'm afraid I would slightly disagree with that as a Labour councillor. I would think it's after 14 years of mismanagement that we find ourselves in the situation where actually our grant remains the same. So I would just like to make that point about the section on government funding, which is 19 to 21. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, on the whole, I disagree with this budget. We've made the best we can do, I think, in awful circumstances. And whoever was responsible for the lack of funding to local government, the fact remains we haven't had enough funding from central government for a long time, and it hasn't got any better. And as Mr. Valens said, the money is definitely moving north. And we balanced it, and that's good, and I think the use of balances is regrettable. But if you remember last year, the government told us we had to use our balances to fill in the hole because it's our money and we should be spending it. And we all know what a short-term thing that is and what long-term damage having to use balances also does. I do have an issue with the car parking, though, as I'm sure you know. I think there are equalities issues here. I think we should be charging for all of them or not charging for any of them. I don't think we should be cherry-picking between car parks in the district. And don't forget, we do have a carbon reduction target in this district. We want to reduce our carbon footprint and get to net zero by 2030. Sorry, 2020 is gone. 2030, and I think we should be, and I'm not alone here, I believe, discouraging the use of cars in our town centres, particularly historic town centres, where the roads are tight and narrow and there's an awful lot of pollution and poor air quality. I have done a bit of internet researching into the retail offer and car parking, and it's not conclusive at all. There are those who say, oh, it kills high streets, and there are those who say what kills high streets is the offer in those high streets. It's complex, it's not just about putting charges on. So, as I say, I would rather charge. I think it's a legitimate cost of using your car, and if you need your car for a big shop, you can park at a place that sells lots of shopping for free. Anyway, I'm thinking of supermarket car parks. And finally, I think it was Councillor Jerwin mentioned the consultation. Yes, the consultation said we don't want parking charges, and we're not going to have parking charges, apparently. The consultation also said that residents don't want a council tax increase, but we are going to have a council tax increase, so there's a bit of an inconsistency there.
Thank you for making that point. I'm sure that will be noted somewhere. Paul, sorry, Sam, then Paul. I beg your pardon, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to go after Paul, an esteemed colleague. I wanted to say that I support the approval of this budget, providing we have those crucial amendments following overview and scrutiny's suggestion to remove those car parking charges on community car parks. I think, as the report shows, public consultation yielded overwhelming responses, I think, against the proposed charges. And members will also know that the petition Councillor Chowdhury and I gained over 1,300 signatures from people in the Sidley area around our particular car park. I think, our administration prides itself on being progressive, and I think by removing these charges, these proposals, I think it would be proof of our commitment to resist the pull of managed decline, which I think is a key factor of how we've run this administration to date. And it also shows residents that we listen to what they have to say. I think with the impending reorganisation of local government, it's likely that Rother will soon cease to exist, with a larger unitary taking over many of the services we deliver. So whilst we may wish to ensure that these charges stay low, which is certainly what the report indicated when those charges were in it, there's nothing to stop a bigger authority, if they were to take them on, from hiking those charges up. Now, obviously, if, as I hope, the town and parish councils can in time assume responsibility for these community car parks, I think imposing costs at this juncture would limit their options and sort of tie their hands, whereas I think it's much better to let them decide how they want to run those car parks, and if that means that they decide charges in some of them, that's sort of their decision. But being practical about it as well, we only have a few parking enforcement officers, so I don't think we'd be able to ensure that we generated the income that the report proposed anyway, and the fact that we can only do Ringo and we can't afford to put coin machines in because they become too expensive sort of shows how fragile actually that income stream would be. So yeah, I think we only have a few years left of this council really, so we need to focus on delivering our capital programme, working to get public toilets reopened, and protecting our services for the future. And I think with the removal of the car park charges proposals, I believe this budget can enable us to do that. So I support this budget, providing we take out those car park charges. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Hazel, did you have a hand up? Yes?
Yeah, I just want to, it's actually a question for Paul. I don't remember overview and scrutiny, but maybe you can remember. Was there a discussion about the proposal to introduce evening charges in the Delaware car park? Can you remember that? I can't.
Shall I come in there, Chairman? Yeah, I thought I'd come over this evening because it was 90% of the agenda, now it's 100% of the agenda comes from my committee, so I thought I'd better come over and show suitable respect to you and be in person. Yeah, on the car park charges, there was so much negative comment from residents, especially in Norvium and Sidley, and I think is there one in Hurst Green or somewhere, wherever it was, sort of the outline ones, you know, and the sort of potential tiny amount of income. We didn't think it. We thought the negative publicity and the sort of harm to the reputation of the council probably wasn't worth the aggravation, to be honest. The introduction of the evening costs to the Dulwich Walk car park didn't get a lot of airtime because we didn't have a lot of concern from anybody over it. The thoughts were that if that's sort of tourists using it or incomers to the area, they may be not so concerned over the payment as opposed to sort of people going to visit the doctors in Norvium or dropping their kids off at school. So, yeah, I think that was a different thing, but I think I'm right in saying there wasn't the level of anti-evening charges, if that's right. Whilst I'm here, if I could sort of say that Councillor Barnes didn't agree with the budget. He had a couple of concerns. He didn't like the idea of not setting balanced and using reserves. He was also concerned at the level of inflation we put at 2%, whether that's, you know, should we have put it at 3% and then hopefully get a 2% inflation? Who knows? But that was something he was concerned about. I see he's got his hand up, so I'm sure he'll put me right if I'm wrong. But yeah, we looked through it and that was it. But we thought the car parking charges were just a sort of a step too far, and reputational damage would be not worth the potential small income.
Thanks for that comment, Paul. I think there are car parks, you've got a destination car park, like the Delaware, perhaps a Battle, where there's an attraction for people to come into the town and tourists, and then there are community car parks. You know, so there is this balance in between there in some way, shape, or form. I know you don't agree with me, Catherine, but I think in the mind of, we have corporate car parks, if you like, for destinations and those sort of community. But I think that we've actually looked at this long and hard, and we've come up with where we are at the moment. And I don't really want to have a debate this evening about car parks, because I think we've already done that, and decisions have been made to go forward. Otherwise, we're just going to delay the process this evening. So I'm quite happy to take points sort of there, but I just don't want to go back to a discussion on car parks, because it's been to our scrutiny colleagues, and if you want to deal with something at full council, well, that's entirely up to members. But I think from tonight's point of view, we need to move on. Councillor Thomas, Richard.
Chair, it's not about car parks, you may be relieved to know. Can I repeat my declarations, my earlier declarations? Obviously, the position where we're actually only going to be raiding the reserves to such a small extent when our neighbouring authorities are facing bankruptcy, or at least severe financial difficulties, that is a massive achievement. And I think we should really recognise this and express our gratitude for the skill which this has been done and all the work that lays behind it. What I'd like to do is to draw attention to two items in the budget which don't necessarily stand out. We notice the big ticket items, we don't necessarily notice smaller ones, but which matter a great deal to the general public. And I want to draw attention to two of those. The first is the excellent decision to fund the new toilets in Edgerton Park. Now, this matters hugely to the people who use that park, the parents who use the young children who use the play park, other people who go there for relaxation, etc. It's vital. And at the same time, from the museum's point of view, the existing toilets have been a real danger. They're subject to vandalism, they're subject to arson. And because of that, the museum authorities have been very, very worried about potential loss of the collections if there was a fire which was not halted quickly enough. So from the public's point of view and from the museum's point of view, an excellent decision. I'd just like to say how much, as I am the representative of the museum, how much on behalf of the museum I'd like to welcome that decision and to pay tribute to Rohan Jayaskira of the museum, who has pursued this topic so relentlessly and now so successfully. So thank you to him. The second one, a different group of people will be pleased about this one, but another important group, and that's Bexhill Cemetery, where there's been a lot of feeling about the loss of the flowers there, and I notice we're going to go back to twice yearly planting. That will please a lot of people who will be very, very delighted that this decision's been made. And so I think it's really good to notice that despite the financial difficulties we're in, we are making decisions which the public will applaud and be grateful for. So I'd just like to say thank you for whoever has been responsible for those decisions on behalf of the District Council. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for your comments. There wasn't a hand coming up, Aaron. No, it's a yawn. Okay. Hazel, yes? Catherine, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to correct the misconception about Battle car parks being destination car parks, because for the 6,500 of us who live there, they're actually neighbourhood car parks, like Northiam and Sidley and the others. Thank you.
I still think they're destination car parks, but we'll differ on that. Online, I think, can you just tell me what number one is?
Number one is Councillor Maynard.
Oh, yeah, Carl, thank you. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. And yes, I certainly agree that you don't want to be talking about car parks all night. We had such a long and useful discussion at scrutiny, and I'd hoped that we were going to end up in a situation where every member of the authority supported what seems to me a sensible and pragmatic option in relation to those. The only thing I did want to say, and that's why I've kept my hand up, is a plea to really get on board and push through the devolution agenda with those parish councils and community groups, because I think that is absolutely essential. I think the decision to market them was the wrong one. I think the decision to obviously go out and talk about charging in these car parks was the wrong one also. But if, on a positive note, if we can really re-engage with those parish councils where things have faltered in the past, that would be a really useful thing to do, because I absolutely agree for once with Councillor Bayliss and particularly with Councillor Coleman. We really need to push forward to get these public conveniences and indeed car parks devolved in the best possible way that offers the best value both for users and the council taxpayers. And I'll obviously redeclare an interest as East Sussex County Councillor as appropriate. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Carl, and I hope that ward councillors will take that on when dealing with their parish councils with regards to the route that we're going on at the moment. And I think that's very, very important, that there's this unity between our towns and parish councils and Rother to take this forward to a conclusion that's for the benefit of our residents. They do matter, very much so, and they're at the top of our agenda. Councillor Vicky Cook.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak at a Cabinet meeting. I'm just seeking some clarification. When you say you're not going to do the car park charges, is that a general thing? Because for 1 hour, the charges in Battle have gone up by 15% plus the Ringo charge, which means it's nearly £2 an hour to park in Battle, which seems to me a little excessive. And I just wondered if that was still going to include the coach parking charges at Battle, because I fear that as coaches only come to Battle for 2 hours, they're not going to want to pay the £10. They're going to drop their passengers illegally outside Battle Abbey and drive and park in the lay-by opposite Clavering Community College, causing quite a backlog. So I just wanted confirmation before I write a letter for a full council as to whether the coach parking charges are remaining in the proposal, and whether the 15% increase on the first hour to park your car in Battle is also going to remain in the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can somebody clarify that? I can't quite read.
Yeah.
They are still in the budget, if that's the answer.
Well, if we're agreeing with the recommendation from overview and scrutiny, it was that the car parking charge is proposed to be introduced at all non-chargeable car parks being removed. So it wasn't all of the car parking charges, it was those in non-chargeable car parks.
So existing car parks will continue to charge.
I'll look at my letter to Deborah Keneally then.
Okay. Okay. I'm getting a bit of fast noise from somewhere. Right, I don't know where that noise was coming from. Sorry, John, to delay you. Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Really, I had two concerns expressed at overview and scrutiny, one of which has been partially met, and it was the sheer scale of the drawing on reserves, given our somewhat pious financial position that worried me. And I want to come back to that in the context of what's likely to happen to local government. But my other concern was a narrower one, and it's because we've been warned by our auditors that simply because the government doesn't inflation-proof its grants to us, we should still continue to make realistic provision for inflation in our budget. I regret to have to say I do not think that inflation is going to come down as rapidly as we would all like. And therefore, I think we've got to be very realistic in what we put in, either in contingency or in the actual inflation figures. On the longer term perspective, and with great respect to my Labour colleagues, the Labour government is going to treat local government as unprotected. And effectively, the Department of Housing and Local Government is going to have to meet at least a 5% cut. We've suffered quite savagely this year because at the same time they've removed the Rural Support Services grant and they've actually worked the whole system so that it takes money away from district councils, particularly those in the south, to the benefit of deprived areas. They seem totally to ignore the level of rural deprivation, which we all know exists in Bexhill, quite apart from the fact we have some of the worst deprivation in Sidley and central Bexhill. So the financial prospect is pretty bleak. And it seems to me that we're right to use our reserves at the moment to try to protect some of the non-statutory services. But we do need to have an urgent discussion with parishes to see what they can take on. Because what we're going forward to is a unitary authority which will start with major financial problems. And they're likely to get worse unless the government actually reforms adult social care. In those circumstances, some essential non-statutory services really need to be safeguarded. I have, for example, in my mind, the services we provide at Camber to help protect life on that beach. It's clearly something which needs to be carried on, perhaps by the RNLI, but maybe Camber Parish Council or some of the neighbouring councils like Rye, should take an interest in that. So I hope we're going to start a controlled process of discussion about essential services that we think can be devolved and should be devolved. And I think we should make that as easy as possible for successor authorities. But at the end of the day, I have to say the future financial prospect for local government is bleak, and I fear for the unitary authority. And so I express my view. I hope very much that there will be a change of mind on the part of central government, because they express concern for the value of local government, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. And I'm afraid they're going to have to do that, or we're going to be in very bad financial trouble, even on essential services.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for sharing your views, and I think that most people accept the fact that what you're saying, there is evidence to concur with that. When we get back to reserves, I'm not sure what you think reserves are for. I was always under the impression that reserves are there to be used as a contingency. And that overview and scrutiny, you did mention something along the lines of you didn't feel that the cuts we were making were as perhaps drastic as we could have done. At the end of the day, if we start making reduction in our services, it will mean loss of jobs. And I think that this administration has a responsibility to continue our services to our residents and to protect jobs as a result of that. What will happen 2 years down the line is a crystal ball. We don't know yet, so therefore pure conjecture as to what it might look like, I think, is perhaps irrelevant to tonight's meeting. Andrew, did you want to make any comment on any of those points? I know you covered off very well scrutiny.
Just to say that, yeah, the local government is an unprotected service. It's suffered from that in the past under previous governments, when NHS and education, areas like that, take precedence. So the size of the funding pie, if you like, is likely to get smaller, and then our share, or the new authority's share of that funding pie, is likely to get smaller, a smaller share of a smaller pie. So that is the likely future. The local government reorganisation does not solve the fundamental issues of funding.
Okay, thank you for that. Was anybody else want to make a comment before we move this forward? Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just thought I'd pick up Councillor Barnes mentioned about deprivation. He's absolutely right, especially in Siddeley and Central and some of our rural pockets as well, in Tillingree in Rye as well. And obviously he's been involved in the anti-poverty strategy work that we did and things like that. But I thought it might be of interest for members, if they haven't already read the Joseph Rowntree's poverty impact report that came out the other day, that shows 30% of children in Bexhill and Battle constituency are living in poverty. And the figures get even worse if you look nationally as well in other parts of the country. But I think that's why, to bring it back to local politics rather than national politics, I'm really pleased to see that we're retaining the 100% council tax reduction scheme that we brought in a number of years back, in the face of, I have to say, opposition from Councillor Barnes's colleagues. So I'm really pleased that we're able to do that in this budget, and it does show that we are thinking about those deprived areas of our sort of district and making conscious decisions. So I'm really proud to support it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you for making those comments. I think we've discussed this at quite a length tonight. It wasn't a debate about various other issues there. It was a case of acknowledging the work that's been put in by Andrew and his team, which under the challenging circumstances, I think have achieved a significant piece of work here. I'm grateful again, as I said, to the scrutiny committee in actually looking at this very, very thoroughly and identifying exactly where we are. I think we've had the report moved and seconded, so those in favour?
It has been seconded.
I thought Sam. No, Hazel was secretary. I do beg your pardon, Hazel.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah,
My
seconded
apologies.
with the amendments.
With the amendments. Yeah. Okay. Those in favour, and that's unanimous. No. Are those against? Anybody abstaining? Okay. One abstention. Okay. Right. Where are we, Andrew? Next item is the Revenue, Budget and Capital Programme Monitoring, pages 67 to 80, 60s, no, 37 to 60.
Do
Andrew.
you want Ash to introduce?
Ash, do you want to introduce this for Andrew then to report?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, so this is the report for the revenue budget and capital programme. The main bones of the report, everyone would have seen and discussed. I think it's just to now look at the recommendations from, the overview and scrutiny in November, and really just to acknowledge the hard work that's gone in by officers and senior leadership team to manage the council's finances to the state that it's in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Andrew?
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to draw members' attention to paragraphs 4 and 5. So paragraph 4 at the top of page 48. As you would expect, coming towards the end of the year now, there's less amber savings than there were in months 2 and 5. We're now in month 8. So savings are gradually moving towards either the red or the green categories for whether they are going to be achieved or not. So we now have 1.8 million of the savings as green have been achieved or expected to be achieved in full. Only 90,000 now of the savings are rated amber, and 600,000 of the savings are rated red, as they will not be delivered this year. Moving on to paragraph 5, which breaks down the reasons for the overspends or underspends in some cases, all very similar to month 5 report. So main areas of overspend or lack of income around planning fees in F, housing in I, homelessness. It's a pressure, but it's not as bad a pressure as in some of our neighbours and the cause of their fundamental financial problems. Car parking income in H has improved somewhat since the last quarter, but still is in deficit. And just to point out, when we've prepared the budget, we have taken account of these overspends or underspends in year and reflected that in the budget next year. The one thing that doesn't appear in the budget is planning fees, because Gillian informs me that they're about to turn and that planning fee income should pick up again. So we haven't reduced the planning fee income. In fact, we've increased it because of the government increasing fees and allowing us to increase fees. But apart from that, any major issues in this report are reflected in the main budget proposals going forward.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions from within the chamber, or I think Councillor Cook, your hand is up, but it might be a legacy hand. Right, I assume it is. Okay, we move on. Are there any questions from here? If not, can we look to move this report, which I think is for moved for noting. Be noted, and the efforts, and acknowledge the efforts by officers and senior leadership team to manage the finances be commended. I think we'll all agree to that.
I'll move it.
Move it, and Alan is seconding that, and those in favour of that, and that is unanimous. Jolly good, thank you very much. And next item is item 8. Joe Powell, Acting Director of Community, the public consultation on the draft housing development strategy. And this again went through to scrutiny, and I think that the comments that came out of that were very, very useful. So Joe, do you want to present this report? Or yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Graham Cornell and the team and the Task and Finish group for their sterling work on this strategy, and I'll let Graham introduce it to you, but I wanted to take the opportunity to thank him and the team.
Yeah, thank you for making that. And I think this is another fine example of officers and members working together with an output and an impact at the end of it all, and I think that's to be commended, because that's how we should be working. Graham, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as mentioned, we presented our draft strategy to Overview and Scrutiny Committee 2 weeks ago and got some very useful comments there, and you've got those as an appendix minute in your reports there. I'll just quickly cover off then the history and broad content to the strategy. We started work on this really coming out of a housing development event that we held about 12 months ago now at the Manor Barn. Many of you were there, and I thank you for your time making that event such a success. Since then, we've been working with our consultants, Altair, and the Housing Development Strategy Task and Finish group to pull together this draft strategy, engaging with a good range of stakeholders quite extensively, and particularly engaging with industry, with the development sector, and you will see some of those thanks specifically in the strategy on our kind of partners page with logos and registered providers as well. So quite extensive stakeholder consultation has taken place, interviews with those stakeholders that have helped to inform the strategy. So our strategy is designed to underpin and interact directly with our corporate plan and its key themes, and has 3 key themes itself: that we will deliver a thriving local development sector, that we will support our communities, and that we will take a direct role in the delivery of new housing in our district. Those are the key themes. I shan't go into greater detail on the strategy now. I'm very welcome to take questions from members, obviously, and I thank many of you that attended our members' briefing on the strategy recently. Yes, I think I'll pause there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Graham, and again, thank you for the members of that task group that came forward. That event at January 24 at Manor Barn, was that where people had frostbite?
Sadly, yes.
It was quite a cold day, wasn't it? Just how to remember it. Okay, are there any questions of this report? No? There is a question. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Not necessarily a question, just to reiterate that scrutiny, we thought this was an excellent document, very readable, very sort of user-friendly, if you like, to such a level that we also had a draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, which might have been coming to you this meeting, but we asked for it to be delayed by a month so that 2 consultations weren't running together and causing confusion. But it also gives Joe and Caroline sort of the time to sort of follow some of this sort of template with pictures and graphs and everything else to sort of make it more sort of friendly, if you like, rather than just a dry document. I don't know if Joe wanted to comment or not, but no, we thought it was excellent, and it was good work by Graham and his team. Thank you.
Agreed. So we need to resolve that the draft housing development strategy be approved for consultation purposes. And someone's going to move that report. Sam, someone's going to second that report. That's fine. Thank you, Christine. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Very good. Where are we now? Item agenda 9. Key performance indicators. Head of Corporate and Strategic Services, Anna Evatt, will produce this report to receive the recommendations of overview and scrutiny held on the 20th of January that consider the key performance indicators for 25-26. Anna.
Thank you. So the KPIs went to overview and scrutiny on the 20th of January. By and large, the KPIs proposed for the next financial year haven't changed, with a few exceptions. The first one, there's a minor change to the income from estates, and the second one is a suite of changes for the planning development ones to amend them all to be aligned to the new planning arrangements. So overview and scrutiny were happy with those recommendations and suggestions, but they did recommend that we look at two areas. The first area was to look at KPI H3, which is the average number of weeks a household was in temporary accommodation before placement. And Joe Powell has considered this, and we've come up with a recommendation of 20 weeks. The other one is to consider additional climate strategy KPIs, and this went very briefly to the climate change steering group and last week, but the group felt that the KPI that we've got is sufficient, and probably the best place for the climate improvements within the district to be monitored would be through the State of the District report, which is produced every kind of May or June. So in a nutshell, it's practically the same KPIs for 25-26, with those two exceptions for estates and planning development, plus the additional one for KPI H3. I've whistled through that a little bit, haven't I? Yeah, I've finished. The only other thing I was going to bring to everybody's attention is that normally with the KPI reports, we do some benchmarking against neighbouring authorities, and we normally use the Oflog service, but the Oflog department has been disbanded. So we'll be looking elsewhere for our benchmarking information.
Okay. Thank you for that, Anna. Are there any questions, or anybody wants to make a comment? Christine, Councillor Bayless.
Yes, I have a sort of question, and I think it's a really thorough report. I'm a great believer in what gets measured gets done, and so therefore I'm sort of slightly despondent about there not being an economic development KPI in here. It's not really mentioned specifically. And just wondered why that was. I know you found it hard to identify one in discussions that we've had, but it would be good to include it. It's really important. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time.
I wouldn't say that.
I don't think you're wasting your time.
I invite Lorna to make an observation there, please.
There are many metrics about the economy in the State of the District report, and it is the difference between those kind of outcome measures and the things that we directly can control. And I suppose we have an influence on many of those measures, but I think it probably is better placed in the State of the District report. And it's also some measures in the council plan too. But they, it's that problem of measuring inputs, which isn't very helpful either. So over the longer term, we do measure it through the State of the District. So I hope that's okay.
Okay, I think we've covered that off. Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, the Chief Executive said really what I wanted to say. I don't think, unless you have something which is directly under your control, I think this was the view of overview and scrutiny, that a KPI coming quarterly is really the best way of measuring it. What I would want to say and congratulate the Chief Executive on the idea of the State of the District report, which will allow you to take account of the progress made within the district in the course of the year, some of which will be down to us, but a lot of it will be down to the residents themselves, who've actually taken action, and other local bodies like parish councils. So the State of the District report, which is annual, will be a very important document indeed.
Thank you for those comments, John. Forgive me, Catherine, I should have asked you to speak first.
It's okay, thank you, I don't mind. I was going to comment on the first one, which is the emissions reduction, and say that the environmental measures in this look a bit thin on the ground on the face of it. But I think that reducing emissions, Scope 1 and 2, actually covers an awful lot of ground within that. But I would like to assure Cabinet that I know Anna is going to be having a series of meetings with heads of service to make sure they fully understand the implications of our policy on the work they do. Several new people in post, and that will be monitored via the Climate Change Steering Group. And also, don't forget, we have the Green Team, which is people from all departments meeting together to discuss greenery. So it's there, it's just not high profile, but the work is going on constantly in the background.
Very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Did you want to add anything, Anna?
I was just going to say that our climate officer has already got quite a lot of data on climate improvements in the district. So we will be looking to include them, as Councillor Field says. And as Councillor Field says, I'm going to be holding quarterly meetings with heads of service to do a check on the climate action plan, make sure that we can still fulfil all the actions that we've got in it, and also just make sure that it is at the forefront of everybody's minds as we operate through the year.
Very good. Thank you for that. Councillor Richard Thomas. Richard.
Chair, thank you. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to have housing targets before we'd actually passed the new housing development policy. But now we have, I think it's interesting to observe that the KPIs under the heading of housing relate largely to homelessness as perfectly appropriate in view of the excellent work the Council's done in that area. But now we are developing a housing development strategy. It wouldn't be right, I think, to try to capture, as Lorna has implied, the actual number of houses built by private developers, which is beyond our control. But now the Council has decided to provide housing of its own, it might be interesting to see where there could be a KPI that relates to that. It's just a thought on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you for that thought. I'm sure that'll be taken away and looked at to see how best we could integrate that into the KPIs. Okay, that's excellent. Okay, so where we are, no other comments anywhere? No. So the new key performance indicators for 2025-26 be agreed, and as set out in Appendix B of this report. So someone can move that report for me. Thank you, Catherine. And this comes to second that report. Councillor Sam, thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. And I think that brings us to the conclusion of tonight's Cabinet. Thank you for those that have joined us online and the public that may be viewing in and those up in the gallery. And we'll say good night. It's 19:22, I'm told. Thank you very much.